Once upon a time, in the 15th century, a group of daring explorers set sail from Portugal, venturing into the vast unknown of the world's oceans. Their quest? To establish an empire that would span continents and shape the course of history. The Portuguese Empire, born from the ambitions of kings and the dreams of adventurers, stretched its reach from the shores of the Americas all the way to the distant lands of Japan. Along the way, it established a network of coastal trading centers fortified against rival powers, while also laying claim to larger territorial colonies like Brazil, Angola, and Mozambique. At the heart of this empire were the carrack ships, marvels of maritime engineering that connected Lisbon with all corners of its domain. Laden with treasures from distant lands, gold, silk, spices, and even slaves, they forged a global network of trade and commerce. But the story of the Portuguese Empire began not on distant shores, but on remote islands in the mid-Atlantic Ocean. Led by intrepid mariners like Prince Henry the Navigator, Portuguese explorers discovered and colonized islands like Madeira, the Azores, and the Cape Verde group. These islands, with their fertile soil and temperate climates, became vital outposts for the empire, serving as waypoints for ships traveling between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Yet, the colonization of these islands was not without its challenges. The Portuguese crown, seeking to incentivize settlement and development, granted land to noble captains known as donatarios. These captains, in turn, attracted settlers with promises of opportunity and prosperity. But alongside these hopeful pioneers came others less fortunate, convicts, beggars, and religious dissidents, banished from Portugal and forced to seek their fortunes in distant lands. As the Portuguese Empire expanded, so too did its ambitions. The discovery of new resources and trade routes fueled the empire's growth, while also igniting rivalries with neighboring powers like Spain. Treaties like the Treaty of Tordesillas attempted to carve up the world into spheres of influence, but in reality they only fueled tensions and disputes. As Portuguese explorers continued to venture into the unknown, their sights turned towards the rich lands of West Africa, teeming with the promise of gold and other valuable resources. Establishing fortified trading settlements along the southern coast, such as the renowned Elmina in 1482, they sought to tap into the lucrative trade networks of the region. However, challenges abounded, from the harsh tropical diseases to the reluctance of local rulers to part with their people as slaves. Undeterred, the Portuguese shifted their focus to the uninhabited islands of São Tomé and Príncipe, strategically located off the coast of West Africa. Colonized from 1486, these islands became key players in the burgeoning slave trade. Here, settlers engaged in trade with the mainland, acquiring goods like gold, ivory, and pepper in exchange for European commodities coveted by African rulers. Yet, amidst the bustling trade, the grim reality of the slave trade cast a dark shadow. Thousands of men, women, and children were captured from the kingdoms of Congo and Benin, forced onto ships bound for the Americas. The journey was perilous, with many perishing before reaching their final destination. Even after the abolition of the Atlantic slave trade in the mid-19th century, São Tomé and Príncipe continued to profit from forced labor until prohibition in 1908. Meanwhile, in West Africa, Portuguese influence spread, though not through territorial conquest. Instead, fortified settlements dotted the coastline, often established with the blessing of local tribal chiefs. Interactions between Europeans and resettled Africans in places like the Cape Verde Islands gave rise to a unique Afro-Portuguese culture, blending African traditions with European influences. Further south, tensions simmered as Portuguese ambitions clashed with local powers. Attempts to acquire slaves directly from the interior soured relations with the Kingdom of Congo, leading to conflict and instability. Yet, despite these setbacks, Portuguese influence continued to spread, laying the groundwork for future colonization. As Portuguese ships sailed further east, they encountered a whole new world of trade and commerce in East Africa. Led by explorers like Vasco da Gama, they sought to dominate the lucrative spice trade of the Indian Ocean. Armed with superior ships and cannons, they clashed with rival traders, sparking violent conflicts that reshaped the region's dynamics. However, Portuguese efforts in East Africa ultimately faltered. Despite capturing key trading cities like Malindi and Kilwa, they found themselves outmaneuvered by Omani Arabs seeking to reclaim their dominance in the region. Faced with mounting challenges and distracted by the allure of India, the Portuguese gradually shifted their focus south to Mozambique. But their attention was already drawn to a new prize, the riches of India. As Vasco da Gama sailed forth, his eyes fixed on the horizon, his heart filled with the allure of distant lands and untold riches. His voyage was not merely a quest for exploration, but a daring endeavor to reshape the world's trade routes and fortunes. Arriving on India's Malabar coast, da Gama beheld a bustling panorama of commerce. Pepper, ginger, cloves, nutmeg, and cinnamon, treasures coveted from England to China, abounded in the markets. Yet, the city of Calicut proved a stern gatekeeper to these riches. Undeterred, da Gama pressed on, seeking opportunity where others saw obstacles. In the shadow of Calicut's resistance, Cochin emerged as a beacon of hope for the Portuguese. A pact was struck with the local ruler, and a fortress rose from the earth, a bastion of Portuguese influence in a sea of uncertainty. But beneath the veneer of cooperation lay a stark reality. European goods held little appeal to the merchants of the East. Faced with this dilemma, the Portuguese resorted to familiar tactics, force, and coercion. Armed with superior ships and cannons, they swept across the Indian Ocean, seizing control of key coastal cities like Goa and establishing a stranglehold on the spice trade. Goa, with its grandeur and splendor, became the seat of Portuguese power in India, a testament to their ambition and resolve. At the helm of this colonial venture stood the Viceroy of India, a figure of authority answerable only to the King of Portugal. From the halls of Lisbon to the shores of Goa, a vast bureaucratic apparatus was set in motion, the Conselho Ultramarino advising the monarch, the Casa de India overseeing trade, and local councils managing affairs on the ground. Yet, for all their grand designs, the Portuguese found themselves ensnared in the complexities of empire building. Attempts to monopolize trade met with resistance from local merchants and traders, while the sheer expanse of their dominion strained their resources to the limit. Undeterred, the Portuguese cast their gaze further eastward, seeking new avenues of trade and conquest. In the spice islands of Indonesia, they found the source of their coveted spices, while in Malacca and Macau, they established footholds in the lucrative Chinese and Japanese markets. But even as their ships plied the seas laden with riches, the winds of change were blowing. The Japanese, wary of foreign influence, closed their doors to the outside world, forcing the Portuguese to retreat from their once thriving colony of Nagasaki. As Portuguese explorers ventured further into the New World, they stumbled upon a land rich with natural resources and untapped potential, Brazil. In 1500, the shores of this vast land were claimed by the Portuguese, marking the beginning of a colonial enterprise that would shape the course of history. With its abundant forests, sparkling rivers, and hidden treasures of gold and diamonds, Brazil captivated the imagination of European colonizers. Captaincies were established, and São Vicente emerged as the first Portuguese settlement in 1532. Over time, Brazil blossomed into the jewel of the Portuguese Empire, boasting a thriving economy fueled by sugar and tobacco plantations. Yet, this prosperity came at a great cost. The colonial plantation model, reliant on Amerindian and later African slave labor, fueled the relentless expansion of Brazil's agricultural industry. Waves of enslaved Africans were forcibly brought across the Atlantic, enduring unimaginable hardships to fuel the insatiable demand for labor. As Brazil's wealth grew, so too did the devastation wrought upon its indigenous peoples. The once proud tribes of the Tupi-Guarani were decimated, their villages razed, and their culture systematically erased. Those who survived were forced to retreat deep into the heart of the rainforest, where they struggled to preserve their way of life against the relentless march of colonization. In the hierarchical society of colonial Brazil, social status was rigidly defined. Europeans occupied the highest rungs of the social ladder, flaunting their wealth and power through extravagant displays of luxury. Beneath them lay a complex tapestry of mixed-race Europeans, native peoples, and enslaved Africans, each vying for their place in this stratified society. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the continent, the Portuguese turned their gaze to southern Africa. In the Angola region, they established their first territorial colony, exploiting local resources and engaging in the brutal trade of enslaved Africans. The Kingdom of Ndongo fell to Portuguese aggression, paving the way for centuries of conflict and exploitation. Further east, Mozambique emerged as another key outpost of Portuguese power. Though lacking the fabled riches of gold and silver, Mozambique proved fertile ground for trade in ivory and slaves. Portuguese settlers, known as Muzungos, forged alliances with local chiefs, carving out territories known as praços, where they wielded authority over vast swathes of land. Yet, despite their efforts, the dream of a unified Portuguese empire in Africa remained elusive. private companies, like the Mozambique Company, seized control of the colony, exploiting its resources for their own gain. As British influence spread across southern Africa, the Portuguese found themselves increasingly isolated, their dreams of empire shattered by the harsh realities of colonial rule. As the Portuguese Empire entered a period of decline, it faced multifaceted challenges from both external rivals and internal dissent. Despite its once mighty stature, the empire found itself vulnerable to the ambitions of other European powers, as well as the growing aspirations of its own colonial subjects. Throughout the empire's vast domains, Portuguese forts stood as lonely sentinels, often neglected and ill-prepared to fend off attacks. English and French privateers prowled the high seas, preying on Portuguese trade ships and undermining their maritime supremacy. Ironically, one of the greatest threats to Portuguese dominance came from within their own ranks. Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese explorer in the service of Spain, charted a new maritime route to Asia, bypassing Portuguese control of the spice trade. Magellan's voyage sparked a wave of exploration by other European powers, eroding Portugal's hopes of maintaining a monopoly in the East. However, the most formidable challenge to Portuguese territories came from the Dutch, whose relentless assaults targeted key colonial outposts from Mozambique to Macau. Dutch incursions into Brazil, Malacca, and other strategic locations further weakened Portuguese influence in the global arena. Amid external pressures, internal dissent simmered, particularly in Brazil, where calls for equality and independence grew louder. In 1822, Brazil declared its independence, severing ties with the Portuguese monarchy and establishing itself as an empire under Pedro I. The 20th century witnessed the gradual unraveling of the Portuguese colonial empire. Rival powers and internal conflicts led to the loss of many colonies, while others gained independence through bloody wars and struggles for self-determination. Despite its destructive impact on indigenous peoples, the Portuguese colonial legacy endures in the spread of language, religion, and agricultural practices around the world. Yet, perhaps its most enduring legacy lies in its role as a harbinger of modern imperialism, inspiring other European powers to exploit and subjugate peoples across the globe in pursuit of territorial control and economic dominance.